G'day everybody, Nick Dingle here again. This is lesson number 13 for our software engineering course. And in this one, we are talking about how to read and write to text files. Okay, there are all sorts of different types of files like binary files and databases and all that. However, today we're just going to look at plain old text files. Now, what the hell are we talking about? There will be at some point, you're going to write an app and you're going to either want to save data when the program is finished, or you're going to want to load data from a file. Okay, and typically we use files to sort of restore what our program is doing the last time it was running, so we don't lose our progress. For example, when you write, your English essay in Microsoft Word and you hit save, you are putting all the contents in your app into a file. So the next time you open it, you can open that essay back up and continue where you're up to. And that's why you should learn these kind of things. But anyway, and why am I using text files? It's because they are plain text types that are what you call sequential. What that means, think of as a text file, or a sequential file for that matter, as a good old cassette. One of those old school cassettes with some great songs on it. Okay, if I'm at the beginning of that tape and I put it in the tape player and I press play, I'm getting song number 1. Okay, and if I want to get to song number 2, I've got to either listen to song 1 or I've got to fast forward it to get through the first song to the next one. And that's what a sequential file is. It is reading one line at a time. If you want line number 10, then you have to read 9 lines before you get to the 10th. Now, there is other types of files called random files where you can jump straight to line 10, but that's outside the scope of this video, I can tell you right now. And the other reason we use text files is because they are just that. They are plain text. So when you double click and open them up, you can see the guts of them, and they're really easy just to, fiddle around with and play with when you're starting to learn. So how the hell do you work with files? I like to talk about this before we actually do any code because it's really important you learn these steps. There are 3 steps. You first of all open up your file, and if you're not finished, you do your reading or your writing. When you're finished, you close the file. I liken it to reading a book. Typically with a book, if you're going to read it, you open the book, you read the book, and then when you're done, you close the book if you're normal. Okay? If you're writing a book, same thing. You open it, you write in your book, and then you close it when you're done. Simple as that. So there's actually, when you do these 3 steps, when you open up a file, you actually have to select what's called a mode to interact with that file. What are you basically wanting to do? Because Windows has a very different behavior if you're reading or writing or whatever into a file. So there are 3 ways that I'm going to teach you about today. There is reading files, there is writing files, and there is appending. So reading is pretty straightforward. It's where you want to open up the file and you want to read what's inside of it. Writing is pretty straightforward. You open it up and you write things inside of it and then you close it. Appending, you open up that file and you write on the bottom of what was already there. So the difference between writing and appending is that when you write, if there's something already there, it gets deleted and then it starts afresh. Whereas with appending, you open it up and you're adding onto the bottom of your file. Okay? Append, that's what that means. Just like with our lists video that we just did. So there's our 3 steps. Make sure you do it, because if you forget to close your file, Windows is the one that's doing most of the work here, and it's actually going to keep it closed. Keep it open is the word I meant to say, even though your program's not running, and there's a good chance you'll get an error saying that another program has got the file open the next time you try and run it. So the only way you can fix that is by restarting Windows or logging off and logging back on. So make sure you close your file, please. All right, commands. What commands are we going to use? We're going to use 5 main commands today. We're going to use open, read, read line, write, and close. So what do they do? Open does just that. It opens up the file that we give it, and then what mode we are opening it up in. So that's what he does. So for this one here, f equals, so I've got a variable called f, and this is what we're going to use to interact with our file in the subsequent lines of code. So f equals open, the name of the file is a string, comma, then the mode we're going to open it. R is for reading, W is for writing, A is for appending, and then there is a bunch more like X and plus and minus and B. Don't worry about them too much today. Okay, so once you got your file open, if you're reading it, you're going to use either the .read or the .read line most of the time. So .read will literally grab the whole contents of the file and chuck it into a variable. However, if you do read with a number, an integer in the brackets, it will only read that number of characters. So if I say 10 here, it's going to get the first 10 characters of my file only. Okay. If I then do read again, because it's sequential, it'll read the next 10. And then if I run it again, the next 10, etc., etc. Now, if I only want a single line from the file, use readline. Okay. So these are all in the reading mode. If you're doing writing or appending, you're going to use the .write function. So if I do f.write, the contents in the brackets are put into the text file. A little bit like print, but this time it's going into a text file. And simply .close, f.close, to shut your file. Simple as that. Okay, let's read a file. I always like to do it in this order. I always like to read a file, then we'll write the file. That way you can sort of play around, make sure your file is, there, and I can get the contents out of it and put it on the screen. So let's go over to Studio. Let's make a new program. And let's do the first step. I was about to do a line of code, but we actually need to create the file first, don't we? So let's go to our folder. And I'm going to create a new file called data.txt, like so. This is my example text file, like so. Save. All right. So I've got all the lines, and let's write some code to open this file up and then print it to the screen. So start off with the f equals open, the name of the file, data.txt, and then the mode, read. Okay. Now, one quick thing. Notice I've only put the name of the file. I haven't put the entire address. So in other words, what drive, what folder, all that kind of stuff. And that's because I'm using what's called a relative address. And what that means is essentially when Python sees it's just data.txt, it goes, okay, I'm going to assume this file and this script are in the same folder. If I had a folder called, I don't know, my data or something like this, on the front, you would actually have to put my data and then a double backslash, because a single backslash will not cut it. Has to be a double. All right, so that's what it would look like if you want to go into a folder. But again, it's a relative address. So it's going to start here inside this folder. It's then going to open up this folder and then look for this file. Okay, so that is what we're doing. All right, so let's actually do some work. We've opened up the file for reading. Hopefully we don't get an error saying file not found, but I'll show you what that looks like soon. Contents equals f, because that's my variable. You can call this whatever you want. I just use f for an example. F read, print the contents in the terminal so we can actually see it. I can't spell today. Then f dot close, because you should. Run. Perfect. This is my example text file. So you can see it's gotten the contents out of the file and then spewed it onto the screen. Now the really cool thing is, if I'm handling files and my program is solid and everything is there, but I need to add some extra data, well, now I can just add extra data into my text file. And because I don't have to change my code, because it's handling the file and just reading the contents, it will dynamically change what my code does based on what's inside that file. So sometimes if you've got an update for a program, you don't have to update the source code. You can sometimes just update a simple text file or a file that your program reads. And that's a little bit like how game patches work. So if a game changes the damage of a weapon, they don't update the entire game just for that one weapon. They've just got a file in there that says this sword now does 20 damage instead of 15. Okay, and that the program just abides by those rules. Okay, so we've done that. Let's say I don't want to read the entire contents. I only want to read the first 10 characters. Good for you. Okay, type in 10, press play, and it spits out the first 10 characters. Now, if you can count, you'll notice that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 characters, 9 if you include the space. That still doesn't add up to 10. The reason that's 10 is because at the end of the word this, I pressed enter. And so it inserts a new line character, which looks like this, \n. You can't see it by default. You can enable them, but I'm not going to for now. It looks like this, \n, which means new line. So that is included in the character count. So if I want a few more characters, I'm simply going to run that again. Contents2 equals f.read 10. Print contents2. As you can see, there's now a gap. Okay, and then it read the next 10 characters and it spat them out as well. Alrighty, so with that said and done, that's the read function. Pretty straightforward. What about read line? Let's say I want to get a whole line from the file, and that is all. Well, you can do line equals f.read line. Don't worry about size. Size limits the number of letters, and we've already sort of done that up here. So let's leave it blank. Print line. Bingo. It's just printed that one line, as you can see. So reading text files is pretty darn straightforward. Okay, there's not much to it. You just need to make sure you open it for reading, and then either use the read or the read line function. Okay. Now, I do get this question a lot. Let's say you've got a file and you want to read it line by line by line so you can do some work. Maybe you've got a whole bunch of numbers and you want to do a bit of maths on each number as it comes in, but you don't know how many lines there are going to be. Well, the beauty of Python 3 is we can loop through our files. Okay, so let's say I've got a set of numbers in a file and I've already written this code for you. We're going to do a slightly different example, but you can use what's called the for loop to go through each line in your file. So to do this, you go for line, just because I like to keep it consistent. In F, then what are you going to do for each line? Well, I'm lazy, so I'm just going to print it to the screen. And you'll notice it's got a double gap, and that's because you've got the new line character at the back. You've got a new line character on the end of each sentence, and then print also adds its own new line character at the end. So that's why there's that double spacing sort of effect going on there. But yeah, so, oh God, it's crashing, even better. So that is how you do a line by line when you don't know how many lines are inside your file. Okay, it's no longer crashing, hooray. Now, moving forward, how do you do the opposite? We've learned how to read a file. How do you write to a file? Well, it's pretty straightforward, really. Okay, we simply change the open line to include a W. Then you use your write function. You'll notice that I'm using these new line characters, and then you close it. So let's do that. Let's comment this stuff out. And let's go f equals open. And this file does not have to exist. So I'm going to do write data.txt W. Because again, W indicates write. What it's going to do is it's going to look for the file write data. If it finds it, it deletes it. If it doesn't find it, it'll create it. So let's do f.write. This is my example text file. Hello, YouTube. And then we'll do an f.close. All right, so there's my example. I'll press play, and you'll notice that nothing happens. And that's because, well, we haven't told Python to do anything with the terminal. It's just interacting with this file. So open up write data.txt, and if we jump into here, scroll all the way down, there it is right there, write text or write data.txt. If I click on it, aha, there's all my stuff. Now you'll notice that everything is on the same line. So the .write function, that is its behavior. Okay, it doesn't put new lines in. So if you want new lines, simplest way is to just put the new line character on the end of your write. So play it again. Again, nothing on the terminal. And if we go back into it, it automatically reloads the file. That's what Studio does. And you can see it's now got those new lines into it. So that's writing to a file. Now, there is one thing I completely forgot to talk to you about. I'm going to bring back this code. What if your file doesn't exist? What if you accidentally put an extra letter in there or whatever? Well, you get a lovely no such thing as data.txt file. Okay, and we're going to look at handling that later in the video. So just keep that in the back of your mind for me, please. I meant to do that a bit earlier, but there we are. All right, so that's writing. Pretty darn straightforward. Well, what about appending? Okay, appending, as I said before, if the file doesn't exist, it will create a new one for you. But if it does exist, it will simply add extra lines to the bottom of your file. So let's change this. Let's copy this and I'll put it at the top. But now we're going to change it to append mode. And we're going to use the same function, .write. More. Even more. Why not more? Etc. Press play. Again, nothing in the terminal, but if you go back to write text, it adds it onto the bottom of the file. So that means every time I press play now, it's just going to keep on going and going and going and going because it's appending to the bottom of the file. All right, so there you go. There is reading, writing, and appending. Now, coming back to this issue down here, how do we figure out if a file exists? Well, unfortunately, we have to use the OS module to handle this for us. It doesn't automatically happen. Okay, as you saw, it creates an error. So let's come back to this code. Flopped around a bit in this video, but whatever. Let's check if this file exists before we open it. Well, at the top, we need to import the OS module. This guy contains a lot of stuff, okay? One thing he does do is include the isFile function. So let's set up an if statement. If os.path.isFile, and then you put the name of the file, so data.txt, because I can't spell. Okay, if it exists, then that's when we want to do these lines of code. Okay. So if the file exists, then we open it, then we read it, then we close it. Okay, like so. So let's push play, and you'll notice nothing happens whatsoever, and that's because the if statement has determined this file does not exist. But if it does exist, the if statement is true, and I'm an idiot. There we go. Now it's working. Okay, so that is how you determine if a file exists. Hopefully it makes some sense. Go and play around. You can print text, you can print variables, you can print lists inside files. Go and have fun. I'll see you in the next video.